which impacts everyone in the room in a huge way. We talk about money and its relationship to energy, and its relationship to vitalism, and its relationship to you and your practice and your lives. And open up with a real world, real life experience that happened about a year ago. Got a phone call from Tony Jansen, a dear friend of his that graduated with him from Mike University. And he'd been out of school how long at that point?
A year.
A year. And he was in a pretty tough situation. You see, he was one of those guys that graduated from school and knew exactly what he wanted. He knew the type of practice he wanted. He knew what the office looked like. He knew what technique he was going to use. And he had this whole business plan. So he went to the first bank. He was going to open up his own office. And he went to the first bank, and he was asking for a $100,000 business loan. And he got turned down. And then he went to the second bank. $100,000, turned down. Third bank, $100,000, turned down. And he thought, well, I better redraw my plans because obviously this isn't working. So he reduced the amount to $50,000. Now where he came up with these numbers, I have no clue. But that's how much he asked for. Went to the fourth bank, got turned down. Went to the fifth bank, got turned down. And I think it was at that point he called you. Was it 5 banks? Or 6?
5 or 6.
5 or 6 banks had turned him down. He'd been out of school a year. His student loans were coming due. And he had several $100,000 in student loans. I think between 200 and 300, closer to 300. And if you do the math on $275,000 of student loans, you'll be paying about $3,000 a month for the next 30 years. It's a fair amount. And he was freaking out. He had a wife, and he had a child that was just born about 6 weeks earlier. He was pretty distraught. And he called Tony, and he said, you explain it. What did he say?
He said, I don't know what to do. Do you know anyone who could, that I could talk to about if there's any kind of option? I said, I'll make a phone call, I'll call you back. I made a phone call to Bradley, and I told him he was a great student, very good grades. I didn't talk too much in school until the very end, and just in his head a lot, from what I could see.
Okay. So, the student, your friend, he wasn't a student anymore, chiropractor, called me up and was pretty distraught and asked if there was something I could do to help. And I said, well, I don't know, maybe I've never met you, I don't know you, why don't you come up to Vermont? I was living in Pennsylvania. And he came up to Vermont that weekend with his wife and 6-week-old, 7-week-old son. We got to know each other. So I started learning about the business plan that he put together. And he said he learned it some from schooling because I guess they give you some classes in business. So he found this office that he loved that he was going to rent. It was about 2,700 square feet. The rent was $2,900 a month. I believe it was a triple net lease. So by the time he got done with paying taxes and utilities and everything else for that particular office space, it would have been close to $4,000 a month, just for the office space. And then if he would have gotten that $100,000 loan from the bank, that would have cost about $3,000 a month. So let's do the math. $4,000 a month for rent, $3,000 a month for student loans, $3,000 a month for the business loan, right? How much is that? $10,000. That's $10,000 before you put any food on your table to feed your family, before you pay for gasoline, before you have a place to live, anything. I don't know how much he was spending on his life But I've got to believe it's a few $1,000s a month. I don't know, $2,000 a month, $2,500, I don't know. So let's say $12,000 a month. Anybody know what it's like to have $12,000 a month in overhead? Anyone here know what that feels like? You do, okay? Would you say that's a pretty significant nut each month? Yep. You think maybe, just maybe, that might add to some pressure to get a practice going from scratch? You think maybe it would affect your mindset a little bit as people come into the office? I don't know, I think it would. So we ended up working together. And this is no plug for me or anybody else. I just want to give you an example of the reality of what it's like out in the real world. So we came up to Vermont, we got to know each other. He wanted to open up in Pennsylvania, I flew down there. We found an office space that wasn't 2,700 square feet, it was 500 square feet. And the rent wasn't $2,900 a month triple net, it was $750 a month, including everything except for electricity. And he didn't have a $100,000 student loan, and his overhead went from, just for the office and his expenses like that, dropped precipitously. We opened our office together 20 months ago. What do they tell you in school it's going to cost to open up an office? Throw out some numbers. Do you have any ideas? $60,000.
120,000.
120, they told you, okay? $140,000.
Tens.
Suki, are those numbers what we've experienced? No. Remember we talked last night about conformity is killing us? I mentioned that. You've got the masses and they think a certain way. You've got to spend $100,000, $60,000, $120,000 to open up a chiropractic practice. The first office we had together, nice office,
There.
full x-ray, upper cervical x-ray, computers, tables, build out,
Everything.
everything. How much was it?
20 grand.
$28,000. Okay, we opened up Pennsylvania for about $10,000. Beautiful office with a subluxation station, with computers, with tables. No x-ray, he didn't want x-ray. He wanted a subluxation station, that's what we'd gotten.